It's Ashley Lawrence here with another social studies project, and we have a lot of stuff to get to. We're going to talk about is the North versus the South. The North, also known as the Union, had President Abraham Lincoln as the leader. So Abraham Lincoln was most known as a president, but he was also a leader for the North, also known as the Union. He was very against racism and would do anything to stand up for others. The North also had a higher total percentage on the population, industry workers, manufacturing goods, and railroad mileage. The North also had very good factory industry which helped them in tide wars. They also had wealthy and good transportation system, so they were trying to block out southern ports from trading with England. The North was also fighting for liberty and to preserve the Union. Now we're going to talk about the South side. The South was also known as the Confederate. Their general was General Lee. The South may have had less factories, but they had a really good crop and farming system. Banking was largely at state for the regulation function. One of these responsibilities of the federal government to finance needs of the Civil War. It was also to undertake a rational transformation of the banking and money issuing system that had applied prior to the outbreak of the war. Now we're going to talk about 6 key battles. The first battle is the Battle of Fort Sumter. It started on April 12, 1861, and it lasted till April 13, 1861. This was the first American Civil War battle. The Confederate won and got to take over Fort Sumter. Now let's talk about the Battle of Bull Run. The Battle of Bull Run started on July 21st, 1861. It was one of the most major battles in American history. Even though it was a one-day war, over 5,000 people were killed from the North and South. The Confederates came out with the win, and that would be their second total. It made them very confident, while the North were getting worried and knew they had to step up the game. Now we're going to talk about the Battle of Pea Ridge. The Battle of Pea Ridge was fought on March 7, 1862 to March 8, 1862. This was one of the few in which the Confederate Army outnumbered its opponents, during which 11,000 Union troops and 16,000 Confederate troops. By defeating the Confederate, the Union forces essentially established federal control of most Missouri and northern Arkansas. Now we're going to talk about the Battle of Shiloh. The Battle of Shiloh was on April 6, 1862 to April 7, 1862 in southern Tennessee. This was one of the bloodiest and largest battles inside of this war. Ulysses S. Grant was the leader of the Union, who was a future president. Even though Ulysses S. Grant was criticized during this war, the Union still came out with a win. Next, we're going to talk about the Battle of Antietam. The Battle of Antietam was on April 17, 1862. This was one of the bloodiest days in American history. 23,000 people died. This was a signature victory in the Civil War for the North. What made it even more important was that Abraham Lincoln was waiting for this Union victory so he could proclaim the Emancipation Proclamation. And it was also signed to both enslaved people in the South, Northern Republicans, who were strongly in favor of abolition. Now for our last battle, the Battle of Vicksburg. The Battle of Vicksburg was on May 18, 1863 till July 4, 1863. The Union Army captured Vicksburg, also known as the Confederate. This is considered the turning point of the American Civil War. This led to war led by Major General Ulysses S. Grant and Confederate Army of Mississippi led by General John C. Pemberton. It was an important key because it was the major commercial city and it had all the goods, including food, clothes, and everything important to a war. Now we're going to talk about 3 key amendments. The first amendment is going to be the 13th. 13th Amendment, quote, "Neither slavery nor inventory servitude, except as a punishment for crime whereof the party shall have been duly convicted, shall exist within the United States." The Emancipation Proclamation, made by President Lincoln on January 1st, 1863, during Civil War. Abraham Lincoln was against slavery and wanted to stand up for what was right. The next key amendment we're going to talk about is the 14th. The 14th Amendment quotes, "Nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor deny any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws." In summary, this is saying that it addresses citizenship and equal protection of laws. The last key amendment we're going to talk about is the 15th Amendment. The 15th Amendment states, "The right of the United States to vote shall not be denied or abridged by the United States, or by any state on account of race, color, or previous conditions of servitude." So it doesn't matter your race, your color, or if you were a former slave, you still by law have the right to vote. Now we're going to talk about 3 impacts of the Civil War. The first one is where it all began, with ambulances and hospitals. The nation's first ambulance was used to rush wounded soldiers to battlefront hospitals. Ambulances progressed over time, as they started out as a wagon and now a big vehicle with flashing lights. The hospitals were garage-like camps divided into stations like surgery, covalent, and many others. The women flocked to secure these hospitals as nurses. One of the most known nurses, Callie Burton, went on to establish the first American Red Cross. Now it's a big building with technology and helping people of all ages, with sanitized equipment and spare rooms. The next thing we're going to be talking about is what the women did while the men were at war. While the men were at war, the women were left home alone to take care of the kids. Some women took advantage to show that they are equal to the men. Others struggled because there was not enough food, and many starved. The Confederate side had many areas where the family struggled. Many mothers had to steal and beg the fathers to come back home. This caused many families to split. Many women also worked as nurses for a living. Women proved to the men that they are equal. As you can see now, that women have jobs that are considered a man job. For our final topic, we're going to be talking about freedom after the war. Abraham Lincoln ordered, when the war ended, the establishment of Freedmen's Agency, which declared that the South would receive help with providing families with food, housing, and farming supplies if needed. This would give the North equal rights to all people, not mattering on race, skin color, or previous condition servitude. And there would also be no more slavery. As we can see today, the impact that this gave us. The North won, and there is no more slavery, and everyone's a free person. Now we're going to talk about 10 key events in American history that happened from 1850 to 1877. Congress passes the Compromise of 1850. One new law requires all Americans to help recapture fugitive slaves. Senator Stephen Douglas proposes the Kansas-Nebraska Act, allowing new territories to decide whether or not to permit slavery. In Dred Scott v. Sandford, the Supreme Court rules that Congress cannot ban slavery in any territory. The Confederate States of America is formed. Confederate troops later fired on Fort Sumter, South Carolina, where this flag flew. The bombardment marks the beginning of the Civil War. Union gunboats captured New Orleans and Memphis. The Battle of Gettysburg ends the Confederate drive into the North. In 1863, the first Red Cross societies are established in Europe. General Lee surrenders at Appomattox Courthouse. the first transcontinental railroad is completed. The Lakota Sioux, Arapahoes, and Cheyenne were led by Chief Crazy Horse, defeating General Custer at Battle of Little Bighorn. Now we're going to talk about President Johnson's plan and the Reconstruction Plan. In 1865, Andrew Jackson made a plan of Reconstruction that gave white Southerners free hand in regulating the transition from slavery to freedom, and offered no role to the blacks in politics of the Southern. Now onto the Congressional Reconstruction Plan. The Congressional Reconstruction Plan quotes that post-war recovery that imposed harsh standards on the Southern states are supporting newly slaves in the pursuit of political, economic, and social opportunities.